Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about the HOA that took down my fence. The day the excavator showed up for my fence, I honestly thought they had the wrong address. Picture this. I'm half awake in mesh shorts and an old college t-shirt, clutching my first cup of coffee, staring out the back window at a bright orange machine, and 3 guys in reflective vests standing next to my 6-month-old privacy fence. My fence. The one I paid for in cash and waited 8 weeks for because everybody's doing home projects right now. At first I figured it was a mix-up with the house behind me. They were having some kind of drainage work done, and the lot lines are weird in our subdivision. So I slid open the back door and walked out, still barefoot, raising my mug in a half wave. "Hey, can I help you guys?" I called. One of the workers, a guy with a sunburned neck, looked at his clipboard. This parcel number." He rattled off the exact number from my property tax bill. "Back fence removal. Work order from the association." I laughed, actually laughed. "No, that's not right. The association doesn't own this fence. I do. I paid for it. There must be a mistake." That's when I heard the clap of wedges on concrete and the unmistakable voice of my least favorite person in the city, Marla, the president of our homeowners association. Marla is one of those people who makes you feel like you're being graded anytime she looks at you. Perfect bob haircut, golf visor, clipboard surgically attached to her hand. I swear she smells like fresh toner. "There's no mistake," she said, coming around the side of my house like she owned the deed. "We've been over this, Mason. Your fence violates the updated visual openness guideline for properties adjacent to the common area. We have a common area on the other side of my fence," I said slowly, pointing. "On the other side, over there. This," I waved my mug at the wood planks. "This is my yard. That is my pool. You can't just take down my fence." Behind her, my across-the-street neighbor Trent was lurking with his arms folded, pretending not to listen while obviously listening very hard. He had that look like he was watching a reality show live. Marla gave me a practiced smile that somehow made me feel like I'd already lost. "Technically," she said, "the association has authority over external structures visible from the common areas and streets per the covenants. The board voted last month to require uniform open fencing on any lots bordering the walking path and retention pond. That's not what I have," I said, "because my pool permit required a privacy fence, 4-sided enclosure. You remember? We sent all that in. Your signature is literally on the approval letter." She waved that off like it was a bug. Code enforcement updated their interpretation. The board consulted with our attorney. Open fencing still satisfies pool barrier requirements as long as gate hardware is— "Marla!" I cut in, my heart starting to race. "No one told me about this. There was no letter, no vote notice, nothing. You can't just show up with a backhoe and rip out my fence." "You were notified," she said. "It was on the agenda for the June meeting. Minutes were posted in the portal." "The portal?" I repeated. "The thing nobody uses? I work nights. I don't have time to read your PDFs at midnight." No. She clasped her hands over her clipboard and looked at the workers. "Gentlemen, go ahead." The excavator roared to life. "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" I stepped between the bucket and my fence like a madman. "You touch this fence without my written consent. That's destruction of private property. I'll call the cops right now." She gave me this pitying look that made my blood pressure spike. "You're welcome to call," she said. "But the association's within its authority. You signed the covenants, Mason. We all did. Sometimes that means accepting decisions you don't personally like." "I signed that I wouldn't park a boat in my driveway," I snapped. "Not that you could let half the neighborhood stare into my yard." And right on cue, as if the universe wanted to underline the absurdity, little clusters of neighbors started drifting out onto the walking path behind my fence. People with strollers, people with dogs, kids on scooters. All slowing down, all stopping, all pretending they weren't gawking as my private backyard started to feel less private by the second. Behind me, the excavator idled impatiently. I stepped closer to Marla. "I'm serious. Do not touch my fence. You are not my landlord. You are not the government. You're a volunteer board that sends passive-aggressive letters about trash cans." Her smile tightened. "This hostility is exactly why we needed to address the fence, Mason. It's closed off the community. The board feels strongly that those of us living along the path have a special responsibility to contribute to a sense of openness and shared amenities." "Shared amenities?" I echoed. "That beautiful pool," she said, gesturing around me like she was showing off a resort. "The association feels it would be wonderful if it were more visually accessible. It creates a sense of community. People see others enjoying the space. It encourages neighborly interaction. It finally clicked. "You think my pool is a community amenity," I said, staring at her. "My pool that I paid for, that I maintain, that I insure, with my water bill and my electric bill and my liability insurance. That pool?" She blinked slowly. "Well, it's part of the lifestyle the neighborhood offers. And by a visual openness, what you actually mean is you want people to be able to cut through here and use it, don't you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I glanced past her and caught Trent's expression. That little flash of, "I'm not supposed to say anything" on his face told me everything. "Unbelievable," I muttered. Marla took a breath. "You can cooperate with what the board has already decided, or you can force us to pursue compliance penalties. Either way, this fence is coming down. I'd really prefer we keep things cordial." Something inside me went very, very still. I stepped back, raised my hands, and said, "Fine, do what you're going to do. But I'm telling you, if I see anyone on my land or in my pool without my permission, I will call 911. Every single time. You are on notice." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Then she did the most infuriating thing I've ever seen. She pulled her phone out, tapped a contact, put it on speaker, and said, "Hi, yes, I'd like to report a neighbor making threats about calling 911 to harass residents who are lawfully enjoying the community space." The workers shifted uncomfortably. Trent's eyebrows shot up. I just stood there, absolutely floored. "Are you seriously calling the police because I said I would call the police on trespassers?" I said, my voice cracking a little. She turned her back on me, still talking calmly to the dispatcher. "Yes, ma'am. He's being very aggressive about it. Yes, I'm the association president. No, the pool isn't technically on common property, but under our covenants," I didn't even hear the rest because the excavator moved, and with one horrible crunch, the first fence panel snapped off at the posts. That's how it started. By the time officers rolled up 20 minutes later, half my back fence was in a heap. My yard was basically just an extension of the walking path, and I was sitting in a patio chair with my phone, taking pictures of everything. The taller officer, a guy with a calm voice and the kind of expression that says, "I've seen way worse than this," walked through my now wide-open yard with Marla leading the way. I could hear her tone from across the pool. Very reasonable, very, "I'm just trying to help." When they got to me, I stood. "Hi," I said. "I'm the property owner, Mason. I didn't threaten anybody. I told her that if people trespass in my yard or my pool, I'll call 911 because I have the right to do that." She decided to call first. The officer's eyes flicked from me to the torn-up fence to the excavator still idling like a guilty dog, and then to Marla. "Ma'am, did your contractor remove this fence?" he asked. "We're in the process of replacing it with an open design," she said. "Per the covenants. The association has authority." "Who's listed as owner of the property?" he asked me. I pulled up the county app I keep bookmarked because adult life is dumb, showed him my name on the parcel. "And this fence?" he asked. "I have the permits, the receipts, and the approval letter from the association signed by her," I said. "All in an email folder. I can pull it up if you want." Marla jumped in. "The board approved the original fence, yes, but we've since updated the guidelines." The officer held up a hand. "Do you have written consent from him to remove his fence?" She blinked. "That's not how this works. The association—" He looked less calm now. "Ma'am, I'm asking a very basic question. Do you have a court order? Any written document from the city? Anything that gives you legal authority to physically remove a structure from someone else's property?" "I have the covenants," she said. "He's in violation." "Covenants are civil," he said, "not criminal. I'm not here to enforce your neighborhood politics. But if you're taking down something he owns without his permission, that can be a problem." For the first time since I'd known her, Marla actually looked rattled. She recovered quickly. "Let's not be dramatic. We're simply bringing the property into compliance." He was informed. "I was not," I said. "And whether I was or not, you don't get to hire a demolition crew to touch a single thing on my land without a judge saying so." The officer turned back to me. "Did you threaten anyone with harm?" "No, I told her I'd call you guys if people were on my land or in my pool without permission." "That's it." He nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm going to write an incident report documenting the property damage. This is messy. You might want to talk to a lawyer." "Oh, I'm going to," I said. Marla started protesting that I was being unreasonable, that I was making this adversarial, that the board was only trying to improve property values for everyone. The officer didn't stop her from talking, but he also didn't look impressed. When they finally left, with Marla forced to tell the workers to stop mid-demolition until we clarify things with legal, as she put it, I had a backyard that looked like a hurricane had come through, a half-standing fence, and about 20 text messages from my girlfriend Rhea, who had gotten a screenshot of someone's "OMG, did you see what's happening at Mason's pool?" group chat post before I could even tell her myself. By noon, my phone had also lit up with a different kind of message. Notices from the association's online portal. Violation: exterior structures not in compliance with current visual openness standards. Violation: refusal to comply with association directive. Warning: harassment and threats toward association officer reported. It felt like standing on a beach watching a wave roll in from miles away, knowing there was no way to stop it, but also no way you weren't about to get soaked. I work nights as a respiratory therapist, which means my schedule is all over the place, and sleep is already this delicate thing I guard like a dragon on a hoard. The pool had been my sanity investment. I'd busted my back picking up extra shifts for a year straight, eating on-call cafeteria food and skipping vacations so I could put in this stupid rectangle of blue water in my backyard. It wasn't just a toy. It was where I decompressed at 3 in the morning, where I floated in the dark with my earbuds and tried to remember that the world was more than white walls and alarm tones. The idea of Marla and her little committee turning it into some unofficial community water park made something deep in me dig in its heels. By that night, I had printed every email from the pool permit process, every approval form, every invoice. I had copies of the covenants. I had screenshots of the portal. I had a manila folder so thick it barely closed. I also had Rhea sitting at my kitchen table, her curls piled on top of her head, scrolling through her phone. "You know what's wild?" she said without looking up. "The group chat is acting like you're the villain." Mason blew up at Marla. Mason said he's going to call the cops on neighbors for using the pool. I love how they just skipped the part where they ordered a surprise demolition of your property. Of course they did, I muttered. The narrative is already writing itself. She set her phone down. "Okay, so what's the plan?" "Get legal advice," I said. "Find out if I can sue the board personally. File a police report for property damage. Put up security cameras. Maybe motion-activated sprinklers along the back." She smirked. "You're really going to booby-trap the yard." "I'm not booby-trapping anything," I said. "I'm just going to make sure if someone decides my pool is a public park, I have high-definition footage for when I call the non-emergency line." She nodded, serious again. "I think you should also check the pool code. If they're trying to remove the fence, I'd bet money they're about to accidentally make the association liable for a massive safety violation." I looked up. "You mean like with the city?" "Yeah," she said. "Those gates and barriers aren't optional. If they've decided your backyard is now open to the community, they're essentially creating a public hazard without supervision. I know your county is big on pool safety. Remember when your neighbor almost got fined because their gate wasn't self-latching?" She had a point. And if there was one thing I knew about Marla's kind of person, it was that nothing motivated them quite like the possibility of a big fine with their name on it. That night before I left for my shift, I did 3 things. First, I sent a calm, detailed email to the association's generic address, CCing the whole board, politely demanding to know under what authority they'd ordered the removal of my fence, pointing out that I had never received notice of any rule change requiring visual openness, and attaching copies of my original approval letter and pool permit. I asked them to preserve all communications about my property for potential legal review. Second, I filled out the online form for a consult with a real estate attorney whose website had the words "Association Disputes" in bold letters. Third, I ordered 4 outdoor cameras and a floodlight kit from a big box store's overnight pickup. If my yard was going to be a stage, I was going to be the one running the surveillance. By the time I got home the next morning, exhausted and smelling like disinfectant, the cameras were on my porch. There was a reply from the association saying my concerns were noted and would be reviewed at the next board meeting, and someone had already walked across my now half-open yard. I know because they left wet footprints from the pool to the crushed fence line. For a second, I thought my overtired brain was hallucinating, but then I saw the trail of water droplets for real, glittering in the early sun. They led from the shallow end steps, around the side, and straight out to the open portion of the yard where the fence used to be. I just stood there on the patio, my bag still on my shoulder, staring at the evidence that someone had been in my pool while I was literally at work treating patients all night. No permission, no text, no nothing. That was the moment the whole thing stopped being theoretical. I took pictures of the footprints like I was on a crime show. Then I installed the cameras before I even showered, 2 on the back of the house facing the pool and the gap in the fence, 1 on the side where people might try to cut through, and 1 on the front to catch anyone coming up the driveway or trying to mess with the equipment. I set the alerts so that any motion in the yard sent a notification to my phone. The first alert came 3 hours later while I was dead asleep. I woke up to my phone buzzing itself off the nightstand. I squinted at the screen, saw a thumbnail of sunlight and water and someone standing at my pool steps. Glittering hair, bright swimsuit, a towel thrown over the shoulder, and for a second I thought it was Rhea surprising me. Then the figure turned and I realized it was a girl I'd never seen before. Teenager, maybe 16. She kicked off her flip-flops, tested the water with 1 toe, then just cannonballed in. Behind her, following more slowly, were 2 other teens and a woman I did recognize. My neighbor from 2 houses down, June. She had a permanent ponytail and lived in yoga pants and had always been perfectly nice in a waves while driving past way. We'd had maybe 3 actual conversations. I knew she had kids and did something from home that involved Zoom calls. Now she was strolling into my backyard with a cooler on wheels like this was perfectly normal. I watched in a fog of disbelief as they set up on my patio chairs. The kids jumped in and out of the water, splashing and laughing, at one point jumping off the raised coping I had specifically told everyone never to do because of the risk of messing up the tile. June took out her phone, took a picture, and then, this is what snapped me fully awake, texted someone. A second later, my front door camera pinged. Another family, this time with a toddler and floaties already inflated, was coming around the side of my house like they were arriving at a public pool. Behind them, on the walking path, I could see Trent, phone in hand, recording it like he was documenting this brave new era of communal living. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Rhea was at work. I was alone, still in boxers, my hair doing that collapsed pillow thing. All my first responder instincts screamed to handle it calmly, document everything, don't escalate. And at the same time, every part of me that had scraped for years to afford this small patch of peace was standing up and yelling absolutely not. I grabbed a pair of jeans, pulled on a hoodie, hit save clip on all the camera feeds, and walked out my own back door into what had apparently become the neighborhood swim club. The kids didn't even look up at me. June did, though, and she had the nerve to smile. "Oh, hey, Mason," she said. "We were just taking advantage of the new openness. Isn't it great?" The board said, "Stop," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Everyone out of the pool, right now." One of the teens glanced at me, then at June, like she was waiting to see who outranked who here. June laughed a little, like I'd told a joke that didn't quite land. "It's fine. Marla explained that this is meant to be more of a shared space now, as long as we respect—" "This is my property," I said. "My pool, my insurance, my liability. I did not invite you. I am telling you to leave. Please get out of the water." Her smile faltered. "You don't have to be like that. The board said—" "I don't care what the board said," I snapped. "I am the only person whose name is on the deed. If somebody slips and cracks their head open on that coping, it's my name on the lawsuit. If you want to go swim in a community pool, go join a gym. This is not one." The other family was hovering by the side, clearly uncomfortable now. The dad picked up the toddler, mumbling that maybe they'd come back later, and made some excuse about nap time. "Sorry, didn't realize this was, awkward," he said, avoiding my eyes. "It's not awkward," I said, forcing my voice to stay in a normal range. "It's clear. No one uses this pool without my explicit permission. That's the rule. Has always been the rule. That hasn't changed." One of the teens hauled herself out of the water, grabbed her towel, muttered something like, "This is lame," under her breath. The others followed, dripping and sulking. June stayed where she was. "You know," she said, "you're not exactly making a good impression. People talk. The neighborhood is trying to be more inclusive. You barricading yourself behind a fence was already kind of a thing. And now you're telling families they can't—" "The fence was a safety requirement," I said. "That you all just bulldozed. And now you've trespassed. And I am being incredibly calm about it because I get that you thought you were allowed. But you are not, so again I am asking you, politely but clearly, to leave my property." Her expression hardened. "Marla said if you cause trouble, we should let her know. She can read my email," I said. "I already sent her a novel." She shook her head like I'd disappointed her spiritually, then gathered the kids and walked out, muttering about selfish people under her breath. I watched them go, heart still hammering, cameras recording everything from 3 angles. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I figured the footage and my previous report were enough foundation. Plus, there was a part of me that wanted to see how far they'd push this before I started pushing back with every legal tool I could find. I didn't have to wait long. The association's special notice hit my email that afternoon. It was an invitation to an informational meeting at the clubhouse about the vision for shared community spaces and amenities, with a not-so-subtle line about residents who are unwilling to be team players, potentially facing additional assessments or legal action. I stared at that phrase, additional assessments, for a good 30 seconds, feeling my jaw clench. They were really going to try it. Not just bulldozing my fence, not just encouraging people to treat my pool like a park, but threatening to charge me extra for not being a team player about it. That evening, still wired in that too tired way where your brain spins but your body feels like cement, I drove to the lawyer's office. Caleb was younger than I expected, in a checked shirt with sleeves rolled up. The kind of guy who looked like he could either fix your Wi-Fi or cross-examine you, depending on the context. His conference room had a view of a parking lot and a plant that had seen better days, which somehow made me trust him more. I laid out the whole situation, from fence permits to Marla's call to 911 to the unauthorized swim club in my backyard. I showed him the pictures of the torn-down fence, the group texts, the email about shared amenities. He listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. "Okay," he said. "First of all, you are not crazy. This is bold, even for a homeowners association. And I say that as someone who makes a living off HOA drama." "That's comforting," I muttered. He smiled briefly. "Let's break it down. They absolutely do not have the authority to physically alter or remove structures on your individually owned lot without a court order. The covenants might give them the right to demand compliance, fine you, or even pursue a lien if you refuse, but they don't get to just send a crew in like they're the city. That's a big no." "Officer said something like that," I said. "Right. Now, about the pool. Your county requires a barrier around residential pools. The code is very clear on height, self-latching gates, all of it. If they've removed a section of your fence and encouraged others to treat your yard as a common area, they've potentially opened themselves up to serious liability, especially since you warned them in writing. So what do I do?" I asked. "Short term? You document everything, which you're already doing. You send a certified letter demanding they cease any further alterations to your property and restore your fence to its previous condition at their expense. You also contact the city's building and safety department about the pool barrier being compromised. Let them know the association is interfering with a permitted safety feature." "And long term?" I asked. He flipped through the covenants I'd printed. "Long term, you probably end up in a civil dispute. Maybe arbitration, maybe court, but you're in a stronger position than they are. They're acting way outside the usual HOA lane. One more thing. Don't call 911 on neighbors using the pool unless someone's actually refusing to leave after you tell them to, or they're doing something dangerous. Do call the non-emergency number to report trespass, especially if you have footage and prior incidents." "I already told Marla I'd call," I said. "That's what set her off." He shrugged. "You're within your rights, just don't give them anything they can spin as you being a loose cannon. Let them be the ones overreaching." As I drove home from that meeting, folder heavier now with legal letterhead, I started to realize this wasn't just going to be a spat. This was war. Not the dramatic action movie kind. The slow, paperwork-filled, long game kind where whoever had the most patience and documentation won. Unfortunately for Marla and her dream of turning my backyard into a community pool, I work in a world where everything has to be charted and every action justified. I have patience, I have documentation, and thanks to a lifetime of dealing with systems that assume they're always right, I have a very deep well of stubborn. They wanted a fight? Fine, they were going to get one. The thing about declaring war on people who live within walking distance of your front door is that it gets exhausting very fast. The day after I met with Caleb, I took a personal day from the hospital so I could do things like stand in line at the post office and talk to city employees instead of dealing with ventilators and alarms. It felt weirdly similar though. Same bureaucracy, different stakes. First item, the certified letter. Caleb had drafted it and emailed it over that morning. It was short, direct, and so polite it wrapped back around to menacing. In lawyer language, it basically said, The association had no authority to remove any portion of my fence without my written consent or a court order. They had compromised a legally required pool barrier and were encouraging trespass. They were ordered to cease and desist any further alteration to my property. They would be held responsible for all costs necessary to restore the fence and for any damages arising out of their interference. I printed it, signed it, and drove it to the post office for certified mail with return receipt. Then, for my own satisfaction, I took a copy and slid it under the door of the association's little office in the clubhouse. Petty? Maybe. But I liked the visual of Marla finding that envelope right before she sat down with her morning planner. Second item, the city. I'd expected to get stuck in a phone tree for an hour, but the woman at the building and safety department actually picked up after 3 rings. I explained that my neighborhood association had removed a large section of my pool barrier without my consent, that the pool was permitted and inspected with that fence in place, and that people were now using the pool without my permission. She didn't sound thrilled. "You said you have a copy of the original permit and inspection sign-off?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. And I've got photos of the fence before they touched it, and photos of the work crew taking it down." "Can you email those?" she said. "This is something we'd want to look at. We take pool barriers very seriously, especially if it's being treated like something the public can access." I sent the email while we were still on the call. She glanced at it on her end. I heard a little hiss of breath. "Oh, that fence is gone," she said. "Yeah, okay. I'm going to assign an inspector. Someone will reach out to you to schedule a visit." "Thank you," I said. "Just so I'm clear, while the barrier is compromised, am I allowed to use the pool, or am I supposed to shut it down?" She thought for a second. "Technically, the code doesn't say you can't set one toe in the water, but if something happens, if a kid wanders in and falls, everyone is going to ask why the barrier wasn't there. Until this is resolved, I'd recommend securing it however you can and not inviting anyone over, and document every step." "Story of my life lately," I said. Third item, my own temporary fix, and I didn't have the cash on hand for a whole new stretch of fence right that second, and my lawyer had advised me not to put up more permanent structures that could muddy the liability question, but I also couldn't just leave the yard wide open. So I drove to the home center, bought a run of that ugly plastic construction fencing and some metal stakes, and installed the least glamorous barrier you've ever seen from my back patio to what was left of the original fence line. I also printed 3 laminated signs for the gaps in big, plain letters. "Private property, no trespassing, no swimming, violators will be reported." I stuck one on the patio door, one on the temporary fence, and one facing the walking path behind the yard. Subtlety was not the goal. Rhea came over that evening and stood with me at the back door, looking at my makeshift orange fence and the signs like we were gazing upon a modern art exhibit titled "Middle Class Rage." "This is depressing," she said. "Like you bought a little slice of vacation and somebody turned it into a construction site." "Yeah," I said. "But if this keeps one kid from wandering in while I'm at work, it's worth it." She bumped my shoulder with hers. The city lady sounded serious, at least. "I'm counting on it," I said. "Because you know Marla's going to frame this as me causing trouble, not her overstepping." Rhea smirked. "The group chat is already doing that. Apparently you've declared war on the association and threatened to bankrupt the neighborhood with nuisance complaints, which is impressive given you've made like 2 phone calls." "I'm honored," I said dryly. "They think I'm way more powerful than I actually am." "Give it time," she said. "Petty people always underestimate how long a tired healthcare worker can hold a grudge." She wasn't wrong. The inspector came out 3 days later. I got the call while I was half asleep. I dragged on jeans and met him in the driveway. He introduced himself as Mark, showed me his city badge, and walked the side of the house with me toward the pool. "You're Mason?" he asked. "We spoke on the phone?" "That's me," I said. "Thanks for coming." He stopped dead when he saw the gap in the real fence and my bright orange temporary barrier. "You weren't exaggerating," he said. "They took out the whole section." "Yep, hired a crew and everything." I stopped them halfway through with the help of a police officer who basically told them they were out of line. Mark walked the perimeter, measured the remaining fence, checked the gate hardware, and made notes on a tablet. "You pulled this permit last year," he said. "Everything was signed off, so someone with authority knew this was the approved barrier." I pointed to the corner where the original inspection sticker was still stuck to the inside of the gate. "That's what I thought too." He took a picture of that sticker. "Did you authorize the removal in any way?" he asked. "No, I never signed anything. I never got written notice of a change. I found the crew out here one morning and had to physically stand between the excavator and my fence. Who hired them? He asked. The association, I said. The president's name is Marla. I've got her on video on the day they started. I can send that to you. His eyes sharpened a little. That would be helpful. And just to be clear, has anyone been using the pool while the barrier's down? I swallowed. Yes, neighbors were encouraged to use it. I've got that on camera too. After I told the association I'd call 911 if anyone trespassed, they called 911 on me first to say I was threatening people with the police. His eyebrows went up. They called about you. Because I said I'd use emergency services to deal with trespassers, yes, I finished. The officer who came out told them they might be the ones in trouble. Mark shook his head slowly. I wish I could say I've never heard anything like this. But associations do creative things. The barrier being removed is the main issue for us, though. I'm going to have to write a violation notice. Technically, it's issued to you as the property owner. I felt my stomach drop. But, he continued, it will note that the association caused the condition. I'll also send a copy to whatever address you give me for them. There are fines if it's not corrected in a certain time frame. You've taken reasonable temporary steps, but this fencing doesn't meet code for a permanent barrier. How bad are the fines? I asked. He gave me a sympathetic look. They add up daily if it drags on. This should get their attention. When the inspector left with the pool code violation in his hand, I sent a copy to Caleb and waited. A few hours later, the association blasted an email titled, Urgent Pool Safety and Community Harmony, full of cheery talk about shared resources and proper channels. Not one line admitted they'd ordered my permitted safety fence torn out. I replied only to the board, attached the notice and Caleb's letter, and wrote that any fines would come from their decision, not my report, and that I'd see them at the meeting. Until that meeting, my backyard felt like a stage. Neighbors slowed on the walking path to read my big no trespassing signs. Some gave me quick nods, some glared. One older guy quietly said, "They've been pushing too far for years. Glad somebody finally said no." Trent filmed my yard like it was his personal show and complained that I was guarding a bank vault instead of a pool. The cameras he hated ended up catching everything that mattered. One afternoon, the cameras caught a stranger and two kids slipping around my temporary barrier and jumping straight into the pool. I'd warned the board and posted signs, so this wasn't confusion anymore. I called the non-emergency line, then went outside and told them to leave, explaining that the association didn't own my yard, and I'd already called the police. The dad insisted the board said the pool was for everyone. Shoulder checked me on the way out and left, and the officers later watched the footage, filed a trespass report, and told me I was being reasonable. At the informational meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Marla started talking about restoring openness until I stood up, handed the violation notice to the treasurer, and said the board had demolished a permitted fence, encouraged trespassing, and triggered a citation. When he read the part about daily fines, the room flipped, and by the end, the board had 3 things in the minutes. They'd stop touching private fences without written consent, pay to restore my fence, and face a recall petition for the president and one ally. Within a month, a fence company rebuilt my privacy fence, the city signed off, and Caleb got my costs reimbursed. 2 months later, the recall wasn't close, and Marla was gone. The new board rewrote the rules so nobody can call a private pool a shared amenity, and June apologized and now texts before her kids swim. Rhea and I reclaimed the pool. The cameras and no trespassing signs stayed. And if anyone ever forgets and tries the community pool fantasy again, I'll call the police like I promised, and everybody already knows why. Friends, thank you. See you soon.